Call the meeting to order. Thanks for your indulgence in letting us get to a late start. Have a motion to adopt the minutes of January 25th.
She needs to make a recommendation. Madam Chair, we have a guest today that needs to be recognized.
Do we have to do it again?
Yes. So much fun, we have to do it one more
Okay,
time.
so we'll just put that on hold.
So I move that we appoint Ron Ames as acting secretary treasurer for the political meeting.
Any discussion? Just to explain to the public that our normal secretary treasurer is away ill this evening, and so we have to, by the school act, appoint an alternate, and Mr. Amos was conscripted in this role, and thank you for sitting in.
Other duties as assigned.
Other duties as assigned. Okay, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, so a motion to adopt the minutes of January 25th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussions? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So the board did have a in-camera meeting, and we talked about personnel matters and contractual issues. So we'd like to welcome Jan Smith and some students from Cape Lazo site of Brooklyn School, I believe. Thanks for coming.
We're going to stand over here, if that's all right, so that we can see what we're doing. I'd like to introduce Lane McPhee and Grayson Patrick. Grace is students who've been blogging. Well, Lane has been blogging since October, and then Grace has been blogging for 2 years. So they're going to speak to you, and I'm going to get to me again. So, hi, I'm here to talk about blogging and how it helps us learn. My blog is a personal website of my writing that I update regularly. And these are blog banners that sit like at the top of your blog, and it's kind of like we talk about like the cover of a book, and it represents a person in an individual way. Charlie, he really likes snakes, so we talk about snakes a lot. I'm fascinated by history, so that's what I tend to write about. And Reed's blog, he just likes parrots. My blog is where I'm free to express myself and explore my passion. A lot of people choose to name their blog what they feel is important to them, and that attracts people of their interest, and people regularly get into commenting back and forth because someone from another class or country or school found this and really like there's girls, dating, sport, humor, tutoring, hobby, make, technology, universe, real estate specialty, video games, pets, poetry, Minecraft, travel, trivia, business, fingerboarding, and chocolate.
Excellent.
Oh, with my blog, I connect with leaders from all over the world who actually had the opportunity to connect with somebody who actually lives in the valley. And we've been talking back and forth. And this is our cluster map, and they show which countries people come from and stuff. Yeah. My blog is where many readers stay to read and comment, but with the plus map, it's not always every single reader you get. You have to understand that if there's that many potential readers to what you write, and there's a comment, it's pointing to a comment, and Grayson actually wrote that to another classmate here that sure we approve and edit the comments before we publish to make sure the proper grammar and show the commenters in their best light. We also wrote our own comments and guidelines, which include being polite, don't just say random things, and with like exclamation points, question marks, or even smiley faces. Don't do a million of them that take up a whole box. Being polite. And a blog is a good place to have a conversation with people who share the same interests, just like Elena said. And this is me talking to Darcy, and we actually placed each other about World War II. And we thought to be friends pretty much over dinner. Well, our blogs are public, but we have really understood and learned about how we can share our interests and personality online without people knowing where we live or what our phone number is or which classroom in the school you're in. And so these are a few posts about random things about people. And if we get to put our personality just out there to shine through, and our avatars that we create, we do it to represent ourselves in a way that it shows our personality, and it makes it so that since nothing's an actual picture, makes it safe because there's no recorded picture of you online. And what my blog means to me is important to me because it's been a lot of hard work and it's helped me build relationships around the world. And mine is special to me because it's taught me a lot about being a writer and a reader and implementing blog etiquette. And it's fun.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Grace or Elena or Mrs. Smith? Well,
One
Tom,
other
go ahead.
question. So this is just accessed at school, or is there a way for you to do this at home through your own computers at home?
We use EduBlog, which is, well, the one we're using is Miss Smith is paying for it very generously. So we can sign into it at school, and they work and edit our posts and blogs there, so we don't, so it can be an out-of-school thing too. It doesn't have to be strictly education.
Thank you.
Green?
So if somebody wanted to go on to one of your blogs, how would they go about doing that?
Well, what is the question?
If I wanted to go and look at your blog, say, how would I go about doing that?
Well, firstly, you can find it off of our class blog, which is called The Doc, and we have a sidebar, which has links to all of the student blogs in our class. And also, we do tags on our posts, so when there's a lot of history, I have tags like cancer, history, famous general kind of thing. And if you type that in Google, I come up, but maybe So one of the really good strategies is we try to comment on a lot of blogs so that we can put our URL with our comment, and they can come back and comment and maybe get into a commenting conversation like blogs.
So the best way, and easiest way, would be to go to the Brooklyn website, which is brooklyn.ca, brooklynelementary.ca, go to the Lodule page, and go to Miss Smith's class, and the link is right there.
Perfect.
Should be yours.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
thanks a lot for coming. We appreciate you guys coming and teach us something about what you're doing in class. Thank you.
And Lena, can I have one last question? I've been in these classes, and I know you actually do work on your blogs, too. I've seen you do some amazing assignments, but the Queen of the Universe blog, I know the answers. Who's the Queen of the Universe?
Say Sherry Elwood.
No.
Say Sherry Elwood.
Yeah.
That would be Miss
That'd be Miss Smith.
Brandon Bowen.
Yeah, the crown and the wand and tiara. It's fabulous.
Excellent.
Yeah, very good.
We had a presentation at a VPAC meeting a few years ago that was at Brooklyn, and it was very inspiring, and I have told a lot of people about the work Dan's been doing, and it got me to try and do a blog. I don't have the same focus, I'm afraid. It really, really is an exciting thing that's going on for the kids.
It is a pretty cool thing, and actually, when we were first elected, Jordan Tinney volunteered us to host a Vancouver Island School Trustees conference here in the Comox Valley, and one of the people that he lined up to come and present was actually Dan Smith, and so a lot of the trustees on the island got to see the innovative stuff that's happening in our classrooms, and we got to brag about that and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm glad that we can share that with people. Okay, thanks. So now we will move on to old business busing review, and I'll just direct everything to you, Sherry, and you can redirect it as you will.
So I will actually, this particular item encompasses a number of pieces, and because our Secretary Treasurer isn't here, I'll just ask Director Morris if you'd like to speak to some of the information that's in there, and if not, then I can proceed from there. As long as you check.
If you need me to fill in the
Okay.
gaps, I can do that.
Nicely done. So there are two pieces of, there's two sections here, a briefing note from January 19th, and that was simply just for information. It's a reference back for people if they hadn't had a chance to look at the board package from the last meeting. And this briefing note from Secretary Treasurer speaks to the fact that we have had some feedback from the public. The trustees have been provided with summaries of those comments, and the feedback from many of the trustees attended those meetings. And there's been access to all the email feedback that we've got for all trustees. There's been a way for them to access it, even if they weren't copied on the originals. And so we've gone through some of the questions and some of the feedback we've had from trustees as well. And what we're looking for now is some final decisions from the board, so we can come back to you with the final plan. And as you heard in the public meetings, there are two kind of, if I could be so simple, and I don't mean to be this in any disrespectful way, there are two kinds of issues at play. One is how do we make and how do we fulfill our desire to make our existing bus system more efficient, to make sure that it is meeting the needs in an efficient way of those riders who are using it inside catchment to get to their catchment schools, because they're outside the walk limits. That's as simply put as I can. That's one piece of work that we're committed to doing, and what has arisen from that is a conversation about the status of students who are in programs of choice, or who would like to ride, even though they're not designated riders, and what is the wish of the board in terms of how we operationalize or not operationalize buses for those students. So those are the two, very simply put. Those students are in catchment. How do we make those routes more efficient? How do we keep them more current than they had been? We discovered they weren't current. They weren't accurate, picking students up on routes that made sense for where they were actually living now. We hadn't looked at the routes for a number of years, and the populations had shifted. We had changed boundaries for schools. We had had a group of grade 10s, for example, moving from Cumberland to Vanier. So how do we make that more efficient? And we've worked on that, and we have that kind of work completed in terms of which kids need to be bused and where they need to come from, and where they get picked up and where they get dropped off, and we've made some suggestions around times that might happen. So that's the core of the work. Resulting from that came the question to senior staff and then through to you about what do we do around those students who are riding, have historically ridden as courtesy riders, would like perhaps to continue to do so, and what is the board's wish around those kinds of riders. So as Len suggests, we need a little bit more direction from the board on the bigger questions, and the questions that he places on the back page are, first of all, they're sort of in descending order, he believes in some sort of logic as we move through. So what we believe is that one of the things that it would be critical for senior staff to work with schools is to implement a pass system so that we can actually identify accurately the riders who are on our buses. We currently don't have one, and that leaves us to not know who's on our buses at any given time, and in my opinion as a superintendent, that puts us at risk around safety and health, and there's reasons why school districts have bus pass systems, so that we can track students. We know which students should be on which buses in cases of emergency, and I come from a district where we had a system so that we would have an idea where to look for a student on a bus, or if a student was on a bus or not on a bus. It also helps us identify the number of students who are riding a bus at any given time, which then helps us realize how many seats may be empty or not empty, or if a bus is legitimately overfull, and it isn't just on a Friday having 20 extra kids because they're going home with their friends, which happens when you don't have a bus pass system. So we would really, initially there's some work to implement a bus system, all doable. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Bus pass systems are incredibly efficient, and they will help us in a very major way around the maintenance of any bus system that we have. So we would be hoping that you would support our recommendation that we implement a pass system. And that pass system would simply be the identification of a bus route by a color code, and that the schools themselves would have a list of students who are on that bus, right, that is generated by the number of students who need to be on that particular route. So if you're on Route 25, you have a blue bus pass or a blue sticker that attaches to your student card, and we have a list for emergency purposes, usually updated and kept at the school, so that we can help track kids in an emergency. Right now, we have parents phoning and saying, "Did my student didn't come home? Do you know if they caught the bus?" And we can't help them. We can't help them. Or if we had an emergency and we needed to know where to begin, at least to correspond with parents, we can't do that. And so it would make a whole lot of sense for us that we would implement a bus pass system with your permission or endorsement, I think. Second question that the Secretary Treasurer asked for some direction on is, would you consider charging a fee for discretionary riders? And those would be students who would be filling seats that are left over on a bus. And sometimes on some bus routes we have seats that are available that we don't need because buses are built for 56 or 84 or 62, and sometimes that route, just because of the logic of how that route needs to start and finish, will only have 37 students on it. So if we have seats available for students along that route who are discretionary riders, they're program of choice riders, or they somehow are willing to walk from outside their walk limit back towards a bus stop, and they want to be able to ride that bus, would you be willing to charge a fee for that? The other thing about fees is that you have asked us to ask you whether or not do you want to consider charging fees for all students generally, or do you want to just, and if you do, what would those fees be? You asked us to do a bit of research, and fees vary on the island in particular from anywhere from $40 a year, which we could only assume doesn't begin to cover the cost of a bus. It's a small subsidy towards the cost of running a bus, to $200 a year. And that still doesn't cover the cost of running a bus. The average cost of running a bus is anywhere between a 56-seat bus, 62-seat bus will cost us roughly $60,000 in a year to run. So roughly a 60-seat bus, roughly $1,000 a year it costs the district to operationalize all the costs of running the bus, from fuel to insurance to maintenance to staffing to all of those things. And so some districts will charge, there are some districts and private schools in particular that charge the full cost, but most districts charge a portion of the cost. And then we would hope that you'd looked at and heard the conversations about, we do have some, in making our routes more efficient, one of the bonuses of that work has been that we can make some significant reductions to the walk limit, and we particularly put our efforts in reducing that at the elementary level. And so we would hope that you would encourage us to continue to look at changing the elementary walk limit to 1.6 K, which is down from 3.2, and that changing the walk limit, which is actually an error there, it actually should read, it was originally 4.8, and we could take a kilometer out of that walk limit and make it 3.8 kilometers, which would then mean that, ironically, we would be obliged to bus more students. We would be obliged, and we would like to be more obliged to bus more students there so much, because our routes would be much more efficient at that point in time, and we would have the seats to do that with the new plan that has sort of streamlined the busing system. And then finally, as I say, there are two kinds of issues, and one of them that was in play is that do we take on busing for programs of choice? Do you want us to explore? And in his third paragraph, the Secretary-Treasurer began that exploration, or to put that on paper for you. And if we want to look at busing for French immersion in our district, first choice actually, and you can see a very I would think a very simple example of how they did the work for us, and they sort of go through of what the project was. But they looked at busing the French immersion students that we believe we have in the valley, and with approximate numbers, we could be out. There's a bit of flexibility around the program Francophone students who come into our districts from the Francophone Association. They don't get tracked by Berengar, so we could be, there could be 20 here or 20 the other way. But when they did that work, in the third paragraph, he speaks to the cost of 15 buses for French immersion. And then the question would be, would you want to do that, want us to pursue that? Would you want us to bus French immersion students as part of the big transportation picture? And at that point in time, would you want to recover a cost for that from French immersion students, or would you want that absorbed in that $900,000 absorbed in the school district transportation fund? So as you can see, we've done a lot of work. We need some direction. And there's some more work to do to come back with a final plan, depending on the direction that you give us. And we're ready to go on whatever directions you give us, and we can have all that material, that focus and that work done for the next board meeting. But we're at a place where we need you to give us a bit of direction about where we should go from here.
Okay, so I've been thinking about how we should handle this, and so I think what makes sense to me is that each trustee should be allowed to make a comment and ask any questions that they might have before we sort of move on with seeing what the board wishes to do with this. So I think I saw Janice and then Tom with their hands up.
So for me, there's two issues at play here. One is supporting the students that are currently eligible for busing, and looking at those in this side of the river that used to get the bus, they're no longer able to get the bus because we amended our walk limits, and we took that bus away from Lake Trail that picked a bunch of students up. And the issue of choice students, and I'm not talking about French immersion. We have a number of students in our district, not just French immersion. We have children that go to Banyu for the Explorer program, we go to Howland for other programs. So if I'm looking at 2 points, we have other students in our district that have choice schools, and 21st century learning, to me, is not just one group of students we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at a district, because whatever we decide to do as a district affects all the students in our district. That was my trains of thought. But I have a couple of questions and clarification, and it's to do option C, and through whoever I go to, Susan, through Sherry, or through Chuck, on this one here. Option C, you have revised policies, which I understand that, because that's changing the policy we have now to reduce the walk limits. Increase effectiveness, I understand that one here. The bus pass system, I'm really supportive of the bus pass system. But where I'm confused at is discretionary riders pay fee and lower walk limits. So when you talk about that, because I clearly heard from parents on this side of the river, and when you look at Courtney's and Stats Canada, and 25% of our students in Courtney are the families are at or below the poverty level, and we want to get those kids in our school system. I'm not comfortable where we charge a bus fee to get those vulnerable students and families to school. So I'm not walking down that line, to be honest with you. I'm not very comfortable with that. But I also would like to support those students in getting them to school. And what I'm wondering is, with this option C, discretionary riders, that walk limit, if we reduce it as per what we're talking about, does that encompass those students that lost the privilege of riding the buses when we changed the pickup from Lake Trail? I think there was 3 or 4 buses at one time that went down to 1 bus, am I correct? We lost quite a few students. So how would that affect those students who used to be eligible, and that we did our walk limits and no longer eligible? Are they included in this 400 to 200? How does that work?
Through the chair. With reduced walk limits, we're going to be picking up more of those children. They'll become eligible because of the reduced walk limits. We've also looked in putting together support for those families a number of families on this side of the river that do need support. And then we understand we want them to go to school.
And may I finish that? So, and a number of those families, we supported with city bus passes when those walk limits were changed. I think that's important for you to know. A number of them we did. If we became aware that a child wasn't able to get to school because of that change, they were given city bus, or they were supported with city bus passes. And then the other piece is that I think it's important to understand that the 3 or 4 buses, those were students who were within walk limits, who were walking outside of the walk limits to go backwards to catch a bus. So yes, they felt that the need to catch the bus, but they were actually inside the walk limit. So our dilemma was, and that's A, because we didn't have a bus pass system, is that we were overfilling buses with students who were walking back to get to a bus stop when they were actually inside the walk limit. So one of the reasons why we've adjusted the walk limits is to capture those students, and we would hope that if within those students who were missed, that if there was a hardship, we would be dealing with in the same way we always have, which has between Chuck's office, my office, Community Links funds, and Ron's office, we have been supporting students with bus passes.
Janice, just so we have some clarity for the questions coming, you mentioned choice programs, but it wasn't clear to me whether you supported busing for choice programs or not.
That's a discussion I think that we need to have. I can't support something I don't know the cost of and logistics of. I think it's for further conversation. When we talked about French immersion, I thought about and reflected about it. We have other students who go to different schools for choice programs, and I'm hesitating to make I want to support all the students in the district. To me, it requires further conversation and looking at what we want to do to support our students. So to me, that is encompassing the entire district, supporting them in whatever choices they go to, or whatever school they go to for whatever reason.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Tom, then Danny.
So first of all, just a full disclosure. I have 2 kids who are in French immersion and will be both at Isfeld next year. So I say that prior to getting involved in this conversation because in very practical terms, should we move forward as a district with providing busing for French immersion, that's a material gain for me. Now, I believe that I can participate in an objective way in the conversation. But certainly if any trustee, or arguably should I hear from the public saying recuse yourself from it, then I'll need to do that. So unless folks...
Okay, so carry on.
Carry on, all right. So thank you for putting all this together. And thank you for coordinating the public consultations that took place. Trustee White and I have kind of been around this block once before. You probably have been around it a few more times than I have. The previous time I was on the board, the circumstance was that the French immersion parent, so as a French immersion parent, I received, or we as a family received a small stipend that was to augment our travel costs. So it was based on the distance that you lived from school. It wasn't a phenomenal amount, but it sort of offset a little bit the gas cost. There wasn't any busing that came by where we live. And the reason that we moved away from that as a district, and the reason that we cut costs on busing in general at that time, was purely to manage our fiscal responsibilities. So I don't think at that time, and I certainly don't get the sense at this time that there's that this board is approaching this like the Grinch, with we want to deny everybody an opportunity. So that sort of comes to my point. For me, it's what would be instructive is what does it look like all in? So the all in is we have the choice kids, we have the kids that now will get the bus, we have the change in elementary and secondary walk distances. What's the dollar value? And then that's the threshold from where we start as a district and as a board to say, well, do we have tolerance to that? Do we have an appetite to spend whatever those types of dollars are? Arguably, they would be in excess of what we're currently spending, but is that a choice that we would want to make? And then have some examples of straw dogs rolling back from how do other plans, if we, I'm purely speaking in the hypothetical, if we keep the walk limits as they are, if we don't include choice, if we charge, $500 a year for people to be able to take a bus, just as two examples. And that'll get us to our threshold, and that'll help me get to my threshold of what is doable. Where I struggle is in the absence of, I have some idea of the dollars, because I clearly know what we're currently spending, and there's a $900,000 that's potentially an add-on. We don't have $900,000 on an operating cost basis lying around. Those dollars need to come from somewhere. Does that mean that they shouldn't come from somewhere? No, but we would, not necessarily, but we would need to have a long-range conversation, get some ideas of where we might fit. So my interest is to all in, and then we scale back. I have no issue with the bus pass, implementing a pass system. I think that's just good for, it's just prudent to do that, just ensuring that we're tracking who we have responsibility for. I have a question. I pause on the notion of charging all students, because that changes the game for the lion's share of the families who are currently part of the bus system, and I would think, and certainly my experiences, have not really been engaged in this conversation. So I think that would be a substantial game changer for all of them. If you're a parent and you've been sending your child on the bus for a number of years, and all of a sudden, in September, hypothetically, 2011, all of a sudden you get a bill, that'll get your attention in a way, and will likely bring others to the conversation, and appropriately so. So in the absence of having had any type of a response from that population, I'm loath to sort of come to a conclusion on, sure, let's just divvy up the cost with everybody. So that's a question.
Thank you. Danny, second, Frank.
Okay, I guess for me, following in the same similar position to Janice, option C seems to be the most palatable one. As far as option B is, that was the first one I tossed out right off the bat, because we are funded to a certain degree by the ministry to provide transportation for students to live outside a specific walk limit. Traditionally, our walk limits fell exactly in guideline with the guideline that the ministry specified in their regulations. And as much as you're focusing on French immersion, there's a few other choice programs out there like Nolazi and Montessori, Export program. Well, it's discriminatory to give one choice program busing and not all of them. So unless you're in for them all, you can't be going into one. Discretionary riders or courtesy riders have always been a problem, because we did a review, not only when Tom was here, but prior to him coming on the board, at one point we had 4 buses going at Lake Trail to Banyan. When they did a review of the students who were actually qualified in the walk limits, 3 of those buses were cut. There's only one leaving Lake Trail after that. And typically, like Sherry says, students walking from, we're in the walk limit, but Lake Trail is closer than Banyan is, so I'm going to walk there and catch the buses. So, I don't have a problem with some of the discretionary students being charged a fee if they've got spare bus seats there, but I'm more comfortable now that I know that we are making the ability for students to get on the bus even though they don't have financial ability at home. So. And I like the reduction in the walk limits. It'll take a few more students on the bus, but it might cure a few of the problems in that Lake Trail area.
Francis?
So I think the primary question is how we safely and effectively accommodate all students who need transportation, and particularly those who wouldn't otherwise have transportation. I think as a result of the feedback that I've heard, I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing to suggest an option E at this stage of the game, but I was wondering if, as we've been approaching this from the eligible, ineligible, discretionary, not discretionary, choice, not choice, that, and this isn't my idea, this is based on ideas that have come from the public, that maybe we should think about dealing with busing issues in terms of distance. Like, why do we need to distinguish between French immersion or not? If maybe distance is the way to go, particularly because we're not in a city where there's a bus system that can just jump in and back up where we have gaps. So because we have islands, because we have north, thinking Miracle Beach, like from the north end and the south end, this seems to be something that makes sense to consider. And again, I don't want to take any credit for this idea. It came from many people out there. So that would be a thought. I would think absolutely we need a pass system, because I think we should always know exactly who's on every bus. I don't think anyone should be on the bus unless we know they're on that bus, because the difficulty, and this may just be theoretical, isn't just that we could have people who aren't eligible according to our existing rules, but we could have non-students catching a bus to the aquatic center, or the sports center rather, beside Vanier. We don't know. We have no way of knowing that.
Well, we do. Oh, we know, and we
That
do
they're
have
students?
We do probably have non-students on buses.
Oh,
traveling
okay.
to Aquatic Center. We do. They're teenagers. Of course they do.
Yeah, and
And we don't right now have
they
the
see a
ability to
bus
say,
and-
do you have
yeah,
a pass?
yeah.
Right.
So I think absolutely we need a bus pass system, and I don't think that necessarily has to wait until all the other pieces are in place, unless people tell me that logistically it would be a nightmare to do otherwise. I think that we should not have across-the-board fees. I think we can have fees beyond a catchment area. Again, it could be quite simple. Everything's based on distance. The ridership is based on distance, and fees are based on distance beyond catchment. And of course, there would have to be a means by which anyone who couldn't afford to pay that fee would be waived. And I would like to have that be a really simple system where it's just based on the honor system. If a family says, I can't afford it, and we don't have to get into people justifying or proving why a certain income level is too little or too much, because 7 children versus 1 child, it'll make a difference in terms of income. So just something really simple. I need help. Here it is, no questions asked. So that unfortunately takes me to a place where I don't feel ready to support any of these, even in theory at this point, just based, and again, it's based on the feedback that I heard that I hadn't heard before. So I don't know where that really leaves us in terms of making a suggestion for next steps, though.
Okay, Corinne, and then Sheila.
I have to agree with Fran at this point. I'm not ready to support any of them either. Because for me, there's still a lot of questions out there and a lot of things I think that we could explore, including things like distance. I too will borrow from what I read in the public. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the meetings because of a family issue. So I did read all the emails that came up, and I did read the summaries of the meetings. And what I thought was interesting was the suggestion that perhaps what we need is a committee. Now, I don't know whether that would be an ad hoc committee or just what, but I think there are a lot of good ideas that still are worth exploring, including things like distance or user fees for choice programs, all choice programs. To me, there's still a lot of unanswered questions about dollars and cents and about walk limits and about, really, for me, it's about getting as many kids as we can to school. That is really, you can't teach them if you can't get them there. So for me, there's more questions than answers at this point. And I'd like for us to consider perhaps a committee. Okay.
Sheila?
I'm Ryan Magrino. I don't feel ready to address all of the information here. straightforward choices. Pass system one, that's a straightforward one. But there are a lot of other issues in here. Do we implement charging for discretionary riders? Well, the definitions are still at a place to discuss, and so many things we have changed situations in so many areas. I think that our values and what we heard expressed at those meetings and what I've heard from other trustees, looking at the issues about choice as something we want to encourage for our children, the variety of schools that we have, environmental concerns. It's not okay anymore, I think, to say that parents are going to drive twice a day, a number of kids, and think that that's not an issue for us. So getting our kids to school, getting them there safely, getting them there in environmentally supportable ways are important to me. I also have been thinking along the same lines as Tom to say that I would like to have a sense about what would it be if we were getting all our kids to school. Let's get a cost on that, and then let's say, and what will our budget allow? And that, for me, also fits in with questions about distance, because I think our priorities, for me, a priority might be getting the kids who are at the far ends to school where there are no other choices. So I'd be more inclined to be providing busing, whether at a fee or not, to the French immersion kids who live in Cumberland who are going to Cumberland, than I am to French immersion kids that are within our city core. A 10-minute drive by a parent or a carpooling or even walking, 10-minute drive is definitely within walking distance, is different from however many kids as a group are in Cumberland and need to get to Cumberland for their program, or need to get from the Denmonds area or wherever. So I think we have the basic information of what could it totally cost, and what then if we cover the outskirts of getting our kids in. When it comes to the question about walk limits, the Campbell River busing policy, transit policy does something that makes a lot of sense to me, which rather than pick option C and lower it arbitrarily by distance based on our crow flies, that we actually, their language is that the walk distance is measured by the shortest road, so that if we actually checked and put our walk distances to start with, even the same limits, let's do a run at it by the distance the kids actually have to walk. We are talking at Lake Trail about kids that are considered, as the crow flies, within, going to Banning is within walking distance as the crow flies, but it's almost 6 miles if they follow a road. So I really like to be sensible about how we define and measure that as a start. So I'd like to see walk limits, but let's do it on a sensible, some reduction there possibly, but on a more sensible basis. And I'd also like to take into account in our consideration and our conversations, we need further conversations about some of the stuff. We've been hearing a lot about the need for increased physical fitness. And so I think a part of our transportation plan actually should be to bring in programs like Walking School Bus and start talking in these schools about how to reduce the burden of parents that are actually driving their kids 3 blocks. So that it's all part of the picture. We actually might not want to reduce walk limits as far if we look at how to create safe ways for our children to get to school on foot or cycle. And I think that that's part of the conversation we have. It doesn't make your job any easier involving the bus program, but I think it's part of the conversation. And then when I was looking at the schedule, I found this really interesting thing. We have one bus going to Arden. It picks up kids in the Marsden and the outskirts up there and gets them to school at 7:45. Those are kinders getting to school an hour before it starts, in order that that bus then goes down and does a loop around 20th and Cumberland and the Lake Trail area to get those kids to school on time, picks up kids at Arden and takes them to Banyan. Now, if we ran 2 separate buses that went to Arden and then took kids to Banyan, I just don't think we're ready. I think there's more work to do. I think our board work is around policy, it's around the values, it's around these discussions, and I think that there is still work to be done on the operational side as well. But that needs us to do this other work first. I notice on Len's summary, options A, B, C, and D all start with revised policies. So my recommendation is that we refer this to the policy committee, and that the policy committee may engage in some referral process, some more research process, give consideration to these issues about what are our values of getting kids to school, what's the total cost, what would be financially feasible, if we change the policy to reflect values, allow fees to be charged, because currently we don't have that in our policy, but we put it in, then we have the discussion about what the fee structure might look like, who it would apply to, how we would arrive at it, how often we review it. And that's kind of the picture. Having gone through the process and gotten this, having listened to the conversations at this public input, I think that's the direction that we need to be moving in. Policy committee and some more of that.
Janice, did you have a follow-up question?
I have two follow-up questions and a concern. One is time frame. We hopefully want to have something in place by September of next year. What time frame do we really need to have a decision made in order to support our students? And the other one was just a question on, buses themselves. This thing here is talking about 15 new buses. I mean, if we decide that we want to support some of the things we're talking about tonight, we're talking about 15 to 20 new buses. Is the bus company able to support us in that? So that's something that as I'm hearing this, we want to do this. Can you do it? We go to the bus company and say, no, sorry, we can't give you the 15 buses you have. We only got 10 on hand. So those are some of what I'm hearing, but more is the time frame. When do we have to have something in place in order to come September next year, our students are up and ready to go?
Through the chair. For the busing review itself, not looking at busing for program of choice, we need decision made by April at the latest for it to be effective for September. For busing school of choice, the bus company will have a problem ordering buses and having them here on time for September, so we might be another year out if the board chose to bus all programs of choice. Buses, the companies that build buses don't build them and have them sitting in the yard. They're built on order when school districts or busing companies decide that they need more buses. And the time frame for those orders can be quite lengthy.
Okay, did you want to say one last thing?
It's a follow-up point to that particular question. I noticed in here that this was talking about the extra 15 buses using the same walk limits as proposed in option C. So that's adding a whole slew more kids to our current level and to the French immersion level. And I think that is a decision that we can't really make offhand now or without a lot more information. And if we were doing, as Tom suggested, looking at this is the total picture for all our French immersion kids, but how many, that would be busing kids who are in Comox to Rob Road. We're probably not ready to take that on. But what would it really be if we were picking up the 30 kids down in Fanny Bay or the 30 kids up in Roeville or the ones in Dumbarton? So a lot more information. And it's kind of based a little bit on a, diversion, because we haven't agreed to option C for our...
We needed a benchmark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a lot more detail in there that I think I'd want to know.
Realistically, we're in the education business, not the transportation business. And to look at just that one choice program at $900,000, how many teachers and janitors and support staff are going to lay off in order to be able to cover that additional cost of $900,000? A couple of hundred French immersion students can pay a couple $1,000s a year in order to fund that bus. I very much doubt it. So it's time to get a little bit realistic.
So I'm going to have the last word on this, and then we've got to figure out where we're going with it. First, I'd like to say thank you to staff for, I think, really identifying that we had a problem with busing in the district and moving to do something about it. I think you found some good creative solutions to sort of band-aid the situation for now, and it has helped some people get their kids to school, and so thanks for that. On the budget question, I believe Len said that we get just a little over $2 million, and that the line item for busing is $1.87 million, and he said that that includes the little transportation stipends, 25 cents per mile or whatever it is that people get. But he did not think that it included all the money that we spend on field trips. So I go to PAC meetings, I hear all the time that they're ordering busing. I know that the PACs pay for some of that, but I know principals are paying for that out of their budget. So it's not a stretch for me to believe that we actually are spending our whole budget on busing. So with respect to the budget, I'm not in favor of cutting the busing budget to spend money on other things. I think that we should continue to do that. As Tom says, though, I don't know that we can afford another $900,000 or whatever it is. And I, too, would be in favor of coming up with an all-in thing, and also an option E, and having it roll back and see what the board's threshold is for acceptance of these things. A piece that I feel is kind of missing from the review is I don't think I'm any closer to understanding how many kids there are out there that actually need the bus, not who simply qualify for bus based on whatever the criteria is. So my suggestion is that I, too, like all of my colleagues, I think are in favor of a bus pass system, and I would suggest that if you implemented that immediately, you would very quickly be able to come to know who is riding the buses. I know at one of our public meetings, one of our people that we used to hear from quite often, Tomei spoke at one of the meetings and talked about how a lot of the kids in this area here really rely on getting that bus to school. Some of them come from unfortunate circumstances, and the kids really rely on getting to school to get their breakfast and lunch every day. And if, we cut back on busing, maybe those kids wouldn't bother to go to school, they wouldn't get their breakfast and their lunch, and I don't think that that's doing them a good service. So I think we do need to know who those courtesy riders are, and perhaps vest the responsibility for free passes if we go to a fee system in the future with the school administrators, because they know who the kids are. Yeah, they know who the kids are. So
We don't do that, they do that.
for me, this is about distance and that sort of thing, but it's also about values in supporting families that are struggling. And I believe that our board has a common value around that. I too think that we need to survey which choice programs would the parents would like their kids to be bused for. I actually have a little longer list. So yeah, Montessori, Explore, Challenge Program, Hockey Academy. Actually, parents sometimes cross-boundary their kids because they've been bullied at their current school and they feel their kids would like to go to a different school, and so that's also a choice some parents make. We have late French immersion, regular French immersion. Sometimes families move across the district and parents choose to send their kids to their original school so the kids can continue to go to school with their friends. And we've got the International Baccalaureate program. Sometimes people might want to have kids go to a middle school instead of a K-7 school. So we allow parents to make all these choices with their kids, and so if we're going to support choice programs in busing, it needs to be everyone, and I think we need to survey if the parents actually want the busing or not. The cost is an implication for sure. I would also like to know what the plan would be for reviewing busing in the future to make sure that it's current. And I too wonder about the best way for these further discussions to take place. I'm not sure that the Policy Advisory Committee would appreciate hosting this. I don't know if they have the capacity for that, but I think that we do need to have an opportunity to have further discussions with regards to this. so that this can move forward in a timely way. I think that I've heard 5 trustees pretty clearly articulate that they're not willing to move on any of the 4 options this evening, and that we need to talk more and have more options developed. So what say you?
What say I is that, and please don't take this in any other way then, that's all very well and good, except that I need some direction. I've heard every trustee speak, and they all share their opinion. We normally do this work by board consensus and board motion. So we have attempted over the last number of months to answer as many questions as we could. And every meeting we come, you say, well, and for example, French immersion, that wasn't our ask. That was, would you put something on the table that would give us an approximate dollar if we dealt with just French immersion. That's why it's here today, because that was an ask after the last brief that we presented. So appreciating that you all have some consensus and not consensus on other issues, we will need some clear direction. Maybe it's in the form of a committee, I'm not sure, but we'll need some clear direction about what do we take from tonight. Like, I've been writing it all down, but that's that's one trustee says this and one trustee says that. If you would like another option, if you would like option E, then we need some board direction, that there's consensus in the majority that you want us to explore option E. We'll do that. We want to do your work, but what we've just heard in the last half an hour is people's perspectives on it, and I haven't seen it. We need some consensus so that we can focus our work in the areas that when we come back next time, those things that you say you needed answers on are answered for you. Because we've gotten to a certain point now. We can't move any further until we know what the majority of the board wants us to report back on. So I don't know how you would do that, but we'll need that kind of direction.
What I've heard here, I think, is that the majority of the board aren't prepared to move forward with anything, and maybe what I would recommend is that we have an ad hoc committee with maybe 3 trustees and whichever senior staff should be on there, sort of a focus group to go away and discuss this further based on what we've heard this evening and bring us a recommendation to our next board meeting. I don't know if that would suit people. Sheila?
Well, I think that there is a bigger picture about our conversation, what we need to do. I think there is also some very specific, if we go back to the key of this, we are not hearing a big outcry from the public that they want Rothmans reduced. You hear a cry from me that you want them to be rational, but not reduced. There are many students all over the place and in this area who are using public transit or being driven to get there, and their kids are spending $250 a year to get there and are willing to do it. What we heard most was that there are some subgroups there on the fringes of our communities who have no access to public transit and who would like access and are willing to pay. So I believe that that's a direction. I'm prepared to give some kind of direction to say, please, implement the pass system and find a way to address that issue which we're currently addressing in a way as soon as possible. But I would also like to make a motion to refer to the policy committee. We have to change the policy. We can have an ad hoc committee around it, but our current policy will need to be changed. And so I am making a motion that we refer it to the policy committee.
Okay, does somebody want to second that?
I'll second it for debate.
Okay, so did you want to say anything further?
Well, I just read the transportation policy, and it will need to be amended to do any of it. It's in the recommendations that we revise our policies, and I think that it is an appropriate place to take questions. We've done it in some ways where we look at values, look at some of these other factors, come up with some successful language. We have partner groups present. We have a referral process, and that puts in place a framework for a fee structure without necessarily specifying it until more information can be gathered. And having looked at this and heard this and thinking about what that committee can do, it seems to me to be a very appropriate place for issues, for conversations about the values behind the choices we make about which students to bus. Is it distance? Is it choice? How do we figure that out? And the policy committee is a good place to do it. So, and I think we absolutely have to do it sooner or later in order to enable any other changes, so we might as well.
Danny?
Well, I can't support the motion because of the fact that normally when you send something to the policy committee, you send it with some kind of direction that you want to head in. To send it to them and just say, here, you guys figure it out and bring it back, no, it's not going to work. You either give them direction or send it to something like the education committee for further discussion. I think quite honestly, you can't sit there and just, knowing what their track record is and their workload that policy committee has, you're not going to get this ready in time for September.
Cass?
So while I like the idea, I can't support the motion. And what I'm hearing tonight from our senior management team and also the parents and the students, they want something in place come next September so they know how they're going to get their children to school. We need to have something in place by the end of March. That is 5 weeks from now. So the time the policy committee meets in that. So I'm kind of leaning towards some sort of committee to meet prior to that and come to a recommendation to the board meeting in March so we can move forward so that people know what's going on. So I will be not supporting the motion at this time. Later on, it's a good point. But I think we need some clear direction. That is either have some sort of committee or something meet prior to our March board meeting, come back and have that conversation. So from March, we can make a decision so these students know how they're going to get to school next year and the parents know how they're going to get their kids to school together next year. Because we've heard from management, come April, we have to have some sort of plan in place. So I think the policy committee will take too long. I'm sorry.
I think once again, we're looking at short-term, and short-term being September, and long-term solutions. And I think that given how this is evolving, that I think there's potential to have a really good transportation policy put into place, but not if we do it really quickly. And I think part of the reason that it can be good is because it is evolving. We started off with a certain number of options and then had feedback and can now flesh those out. In terms of short term, maybe we can do both. Maybe we can have the ad hoc committee to bring recommendations back to the board for what are we going to do in September, and then at the same time refer it to policy advisory committee on standby, waiting for direction and input to be dealt with for a year of September. Because it's going to take that long, I think, for it to be done well.
Anyone else? I concur with Fran and Danny. Okay, do you want to close?
I'm a little confused because I'm not quite sure. Fran and Danny seem to be saying opposite things. I got the impression from Fran that she believes that policy advisory committee is a good place for it to be looked at. I think that this...
I heard her to say an ad hoc committee.
Oh,
I think.
I agree with it.
Did you want to clarify?
Sure. I think that there can be it can be sent to two places. For short-term solution to an ad hoc committee, sent to policy advisory committee as well, on standby, not to be dealt with yet, which it won't be because there are other things. Or maybe we just leave that until it comes back after the ad hoc committee. But I think because there's a long-term and a short-term, it can be dealt with in parallel.
Okay, so did you want to close?
Can I start with that addition? Can I just comment?
Okay.
As the chair of the policy, like as Danny says, I would want it coming to the committee with a clear directive. Otherwise, we'll be sort of groping around in the dark.
Okay, I guess I would consider that the input that we've received from the public hearings to be a certain type of direction, and that all of us are expressing things that we've heard that we think need to be worked on. And so I'm agreeing. I think we need an ad hoc committee to come up with some certain...
You can't speak against your own motion.
No, but I'm not speaking against the motion. To say that I think we need that too is not to say that I don't think we need to refer to the policy committee. I think it needs to be referred to the policy committee. I don't see a reason to start waiting or to wait around the question of what type of language would be expressed in that. It's about the statement I've heard from all of you saying that we need to help get our kids to school. That's a prime statement. It's not currently in the policy. So I think there's work to be done at the policy committee, and that will enhance and help the ad hoc process. just because I didn't make motions for an ad hoc committee, it doesn't mean I wouldn't vote in favor of it. But I do think that the policy advisory committee is the right place for it to go.
Okay, so you've heard the discussion. The motion is to refer this item to the Policy Advisory Committee. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is defeated. I would recommend that someone make a motion to convene an ad hoc committee with board and staff. Janice?
I make a motion that the board convene an ad hoc committee made up board members and staff and whoever else they deem appropriate to be on the committee, and report back at the March board meeting with a recommendation to move forward with busing for September 2011. Don't have to repeat that, Debbie.
Okay, would anyone like to second that? Great, seconded. Do you want to open discussion?
I think we've said enough on the topic tonight, so let's just move forward on this.
Anyone else?
The only thing that concerns me about the motion is who's going to determine who the other people that may be needed. The only one I can think of would be the bus company itself.
Or that between management and the superintendent and the board chair.
For you, Madam Chair, I think that I would take the spirit of that as just for any resource people who might be needed at the time in order to provide some information to the work of the committee.
Would that be everyone's understanding? Is that your understanding over here? Fran? And
My
then
understanding was that possibly a parent.
Oh, I didn't hear that, sir.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear it either. I just included that in my thinking.
And how?
I agree with Fran. I think that input from some parents might be very useful. They might not sit on the committee the whole time, but we might go and solicit their opinion. It's come up at both of those hearings that they have some valuable contributions to make, and certainly contributions to make about what the sense of what parents are looking for and willing to contribute. So that would be a group in particular I want to look at. But, usually agree on.
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be the board chair's then decision who to appoint as the parent.
okay, and I would
choose that.
And and that would, I think that it would be in conjunction with whoever the staff was on the. We would have to appoint the chair of the committee, and that person actually would be the one to appoint them. But nonetheless, I think that we've just heard a great deal from many parents, and actually they have influenced our discussion here this evening greatly. And I don't believe that this next committee work should include parents. However, once this committee makes a recommendation, parents should again be engaged in the process. I think that we should just do some discrete work now, and so I would not be I do not interpret this as including parents.
I'm trying to think of the procedural bylaw, because I believe any appointments to committees are done by the chair
They are.
in consultation with the board.
Yeah.
So you get the fun job
Okay.
of appointing everybody.
So what do others believe about appointing a parent to this committee? Tom?
No.
Dan? Janice? Green, no. Okay, so then that's pretty clear there. So if this motion passes, it would be a committee then of staff and trustees. So as with any board committees, it cannot be more than 3 trustees. Is that everyone's understanding? Okay, any further discussion on this? Debbie, can you please read the motion back?
Okay, I may not have it exact, that the board convene an ad hoc committee made up of board and staff to look at other options regarding busing and bring to the next board meeting. I'm not sure if that captured everything.
Not necessarily other options.
To look at options.
To look at,
Option?
not other options.
No, to look at options. Right. And it was to,
Bring it back to the next board
board
meeting with a
meeting
recommendation for September.
September 2011,
Implementation.
for recommendation.
Oh, for recommendation.
Okay? Is everybody clear on what the motion is? Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. So I would just like to ask that trustees let me know if they're interested in serving in this committee, and then I will provide Sherry with the names of said, trustees, if it's more than 3 trustees that want to be on the committee, I think that what we'll do is maybe hold a lottery, put your names in a hat, we'll pull 3 names out, if that works for everyone. Okay? Thank you. So, thank you for your report on busing. So, as I look towards this evening's agenda, and there's an item there for Chair's report, which is next. There were some issues that came up for me as I read the Comox Valley Echo today with respect to the reporting on the board and staff doing some work with a facilitator, and I thought that I would want to speak publicly with respect to what was written there. I don't do this lightly, because in our society, the media is, they wield a tremendous amount of power and influence to influence the public on any issue that they choose to report on or not report on. My words and actions in the past 5 years have actually been reported on quite a lot in our local papers, radio stations, TV, national and provincial publications, so I know the weight of the media. But sometimes I think it is an important thing for the public to receive a fuller accounting of events than are contained in a few column inches in a newspaper. And I think that the information surrounding our district's use of a facilitator warrants a bit of a further accounting this evening. So the board did hire a facilitator, and it was pursuant to 2 recommendations that were in the operational review, and I'll just read from the operational review. They recommended that trustees and staff agree on the delineation of responsibilities, and that trustees and staff engage in activities that improve collaboration, teamwork, and confidence in reports. And as we talked about these recommendations, Jordan Tinney, on behalf of staff, made a request of me, on behalf of the board, that we engage the services of a facilitator to guide us through that process. Staff were the ones to recommend who the facilitator was, and the board accepted gladly their recommendations. And this all took place well after Lori Fowler quit the board. So the process that the facilitator underwent was to interview trustees and staff in order to figure out what the best possible way was for us to move forward and what work would support us in collaboration, teamwork, and confidence in reports. They did that, and then they made a recommendation to the board and staff as to what we should do, and the board and staff accepted the recommendation, and we moved forward to working on a working climate document collaboratively with the guidance of the facilitator. And that was the lion's share of our work. That comprised all of the work that we did with the facilitator from the time they were hired until the end of December. So a substantial amount of the $24,000 that was reported in the newspaper today. It's become clear to trustees, staff, and the public that there have been some intra-board relationship challenges at times. Conflict is normal. And the board has met twice for a total of 6 hours with the facilitator to try to sort these issues out. We are a responsible board, all 7 of us, and we will consider if it is a worthwhile endeavor to continue or not. But I thought that that should be clarified this evening, and I wonder if perhaps the Comox Valley Echo would consider clarifying these facts for the readers. So thank you for the opportunity to make that statement this evening. I'd like to move on now to management reports. Good news items. Sherry Elwood.
Madam Chair, I'm conscious of the time. I think perhaps what I'd like to do is, regarding this item, just add one piece. I won't read through the other 2 pieces that are already there. Just add one piece that came after the time of printing that we really wanted to share. And that was congratulations to 2 of our very outstanding teachers in our district, Shannon Foreman from George Vanier and to Colleen Devlin from Arden. These 2 district teachers have been chosen by Rotary International to work in the Philippines with teachers and students in science and technology. They'll spend a month there helping teachers build their capacity around the use of technology in the curriculum of science. And we're very well aware of their skills in this area. Both of them are outstanding teacher leaders in their buildings in these areas. What we're most proud of and what we're celebrating for them is the acknowledgement of their skills by Rotary International.
these two teachers were chosen from teacher applicants from across the Washington State and Western Canada. Vast number of applications for only 4 seats, and 2 teachers from the Comox Valley were chosen to fill 2 of those 4 seats to go to the Philippines and to do this kind of work. So it just happened, it's kind of a late-breaking kind of thing, and we congratulate them. We believe that they will be great ambassadors for Western education in the Philippines. They're looking forward to it. They're amazing women, and we might actually invite them to report back at some point in time from their experience, because they themselves have declared that they will learn a great deal with their experience in the Philippines, and they hope to become better teachers for that. But we're just incredibly proud of them. That's a major accomplishment, and it's a major accomplishment for British Columbia teachers and for the Valley themselves to hold 2 spots out of 4 for something as large as that. So that was just the piece that I'll add to my report.
Cool. Thank you.
Tomorrow is Melissa's Pink Shirt Day.
It is.
And Anti-Bullying Day, and I understand our district is very well supporting that. And
We are, I'm sorry, yeah, we are. There's a number of schools doing a number of things, and many of them are doing them as, and the reason it is not a good news thing is there's such a variety of things going on. A number of schools have already had a number of events that are leading up to tomorrow, and they started many weeks ago. Some of them are having events that this is the kickoff for tomorrow, and then there are events that are coming after. So I'm hoping to put that all together for the next board meeting so I can talk about the whole thing. There's a piece on our website. It's not just an undertaking in British Columbia, it's across Canada and in parts of the United States as well. But it's an amazing event.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item?
And I'll go on to the next item, and again, I perhaps might not do what I was thinking that I might do in terms of the time that we have. Through you, Madam Chair, the board asked at the last meeting, and I will remind you, and I don't normally do this, but the last meeting was actually only 2 weeks ago, as opposed to 4 weeks ago. And I said at the time, and I was very tired probably, I said, oh yes, I can get this all together in 2 weeks or not. And I'm here to say to you that I have done most of it, but haven't been able to, in the 2 weeks, been able to. I haven't been able to connect with all the partner groups, and so you don't see a budget, for example, before you, because I need to honor that commitment and speak with them. But what I'd like to share with you is the planning that we have so far, and I will have that in place for, I know I have to go before, if you accept the recommendation, which is to refer your request of me to the budget process, I will have the ability, hopefully, to have it all wrapped up by the time that meeting is. I think it's on Thursday, yeah. So there's some pieces to just put together. But if I could just begin, as we have begun to speak about, and we've been speaking for about 8 months now about the change that is coming in education in a good way, a good kind of change, and I won't give you my speech about the things that we like about it and the things that we're going to choose not to do. But the things that we like about it are in many areas. It is going to ask for us all to play a bit of a different role. For students to play, in the future, to play a role that speaks to their self-responsibility around their learning, and for teachers to have changes in their role in terms of, I think, enhancing, hopefully connecting them with their passions in their instructional topics, but also for the roles of support staff and the roles of all of us, including parents, in the lives of our students in the learning community. So as we began to look at that, one of the things that we believe that you charged us with was the idea that at least as we begin this journey together, there would be an opportunity for all staff for whom it is appropriate to access the base level of staff development around beginning conversations around 21st century learning and the acquisition of some professional development in those areas. And so that's what we've begun. So what you're seeing is that already we are able to identify, and these are certainly coming from the documents that are coming from the ministry and coming from bigger, larger conversations, the 21st Century Learning Network, that the things that we believe that we will see and we're welcoming are a differentiated learning environment. The idea that this just confirms what we know, that teachers know that students learn at different rates in different ways and often need different kinds of way to demonstrate their knowledge. It comes from everything we know about multiple intelligences that attach to adolescent development, that attach to the kinds of skills that our students arrive at our doors with, and they vary. And we have always tried to recognize that. But one of the things that we've known is that very often we recognize it in the individual instruction, but there are still some benchmarks, particularly from the ministry, like provincial exams and things, that don't give us opportunities to recognize. So we take students on a journey for a little while, but at the end of the day we say, but there will be a provincial exam at the end of this, and you have to fit in this box in order to demonstrate what you know. So the good news is that the direction that's coming from the ministry, recognizing that we're going to need to provide multiple ways for students to access information pertaining to what they need to learn, and that they need to be able to demonstrate that in a different way, and that providing flexibility to permit students to pursue their interests and passions we believe will enhance student engagement. And where we are in Western culture education is the realization, perhaps most students would say a little late in the game, but that just because we sit them in a desk and put a book in front of them and say, learn, that unless they're engaged, they're very often compliant, but they're not engaged in a way that has any meaning for them. So we're knowing that as we begin to look at building different kinds of learning environments, we're going to need to permit students to pursue their interests and passions in a curricular way, so that feeds their interest, opens up their minds to the learning that they're going to need. And so that means that we're going to have to adapt for students encountering different kinds of learning difficulties and different needs around their readiness for learning. So a whole lot of what we know may need to change. So as we begin to understand that, and it has been, it's been something that probably in the Valley we've actually got a little bit of a head start on in many ways in our inquiry-based learning or our project-based learning. That's where we've made some strides in that area that perhaps in other jurisdictions they haven't. That we know that engaging students in their lessons, that fostering student ownership in their own learning, and that creating conditions that will help students achieve what we call flow, that intensity of learning when they're fully engaged in something that they want to learn or that they understand why they need to learn it, that the kind of imprinting that does for them in terms of their brain allows them to put that in a container that they can put on a shelf and go back to. That when they are passively engaged, where there's a book in front of them and I'm the teacher and I'm talking the entire time, that they have the ability to go somewhere else. And I probably wouldn't blame them. And they're somewhere else and the book is open and that passive learning doesn't imprint at the same level in their brain that engagement does. And so we're going to need to make sure that we can give them some kind of that kind of activity and that kind of energy in their learning. And we do in many ways now. Please understand that this is not because it's not happening in classrooms. It's because we finally have an acknowledgement from the Ministry of Ed that this is how students need to learn, and that we can now honor that in a different kind of way. And then, of course, what we have in British Columbia in particular in the last 20 years, we spent a lot of time researching about how students learn and gathering research about brain-based learning. And we have in many pockets of many schools experts in the school on brain-based learning. But teachers who are as old as I am, they didn't teach that to me in the university. Now I happen to be fascinated by it. But there are teachers who haven't had those experiences. And one of the staff development areas that we could enhance for all staff, EAs, everyone who's working with students, is some basic understanding about what brain-based learning means and how so that you can understand how students learn and how the brain actually functions and enhances learning or doesn't enhance learning. So the idea of what imprints and what doesn't. So those are the kinds of things that we need to, it's not just about technology, we need to learn about some big picture things. So then, of course, as we change our practice, and as teachers perhaps become facilitators and guiders and advisors, and EAs that support students in classrooms, and parents who create home learning environments for students to help support their students, we understand that very possibly, and hopefully go figure, that the assessment rubrics that we've been using for a very long time, most of them driven by the ministry, have never ever had boxes in the right places for kids, very often. For lots of kids who are at the compliance stage or who understand and who are very literate, can manage visual text, can write effectively, read effectively, and for the most part speak effectively orally, they'll do fine. There's a box somewhere that measures that. But we will need to create a new understanding of assessment, and we will certainly need to create a new way of assessing student work. And that what we think what we know, and what we think that we're probably most most surprised by the acknowledgement from the ministry, which could probably get me in trouble at this point in time. One of the things that we're empowering the microphone, if anybody would love it, is the idea that there is finally a recognition on the part of bigger picture players that meaningful evaluation reporting on students has to include parents in a meaningful way and has to be, for the most part, student-driven. There has to be a student voice in the evaluation of themselves. We can't ask them to reflect on their learning if we don't give them formalized processes in which we actually teach them how to do that and give them the independence and the respect that they have the ability to reflect on their learning as well. So we need to create another conversation about assessment and also combine some of the conversations we're having about assessment for learning with some ideas around student-led learning assessment conferences, for example. And this will require new curriculum. We're going to have to develop it. It's not there. And I'm not sure we want it to be there. I don't want to buy a piece of curriculum written somewhere else. So we will need to do some curriculum work in these areas. And we will need staff to help us do that. We can't certainly do that and wouldn't presume to do that ourselves. Is there anything else? Oh, the back button's not working. And as we move forward, what we know is that there is a place for technology in all of this. And we know that there are many of our staff who are highly skilled. You saw Jan Smith, and Jan Smith is an example of teachers who work in their classrooms in technology. We have now teachers who ask to teach their full life in a computer lab, and they do everything from math to whatever, not always in technology, but they use it as a tool. So some of the things that we're currently offering teachers this year, and that I have mentioned before, are oversubscribed. We have so many teachers wanting to take the workshops, and we don't have the spaces, are around giving teachers and EAs the basic level of technology, the Google Apps workshops, those kinds of things. So everybody has the choice to use them if they prefer. That they're not knowing about them isn't the reason why they're not present in the classroom. And that the idea that we would combine that knowledge base with access to the resources that they need so that we're doing everything we can to encourage our educational leaders in schools to use that kind of technology if that makes sense for them. So that's kind of where we are. And then maybe I'll close with the piece around the learning community. What we know and what you'll hear, for some of you, you've been invited to a conversation with John Abbott next Monday. John Abbott is probably the worldwide expert on 21st century learning. He's coming to the Valley. It's a long story, and I'm going to blush, so I'm not going to go there. But he's coming to 3 districts in the province, and we're one of them. And we've invited people to come and listen to him about what he has to say. He's been working in this area for a number of years. If you look at the 2 ministry documents that currently exist on 21st century learning, he is the major site. He is the person who is cited the most. And John is going to come and talk to us. He's going to give us feedback on some of the writing that we've been doing as senior staff. And we'll be involving parents, students, staff, teachers, some community experts. So we have some people in our community who are working in this area for universities and things. And he'll be involved in a 3-hour conversation on Monday, February 28th at Glacier View. And so what we're saying is that we know that our learning community must broaden. That as we move into the 21st century learning paths, as we look at personalizing learning for students, we can't and shouldn't be doing all of that in school alone. That we will need to involve parents in that the community needs to provide us with partnerships so that students can expand their personal learning path. And so one of the things that we will need to work with staff is how do we connect our specialty, which is teaching children, with what do we need to do and how do we approach the community to expand those horizons for our students, and how do we involve other staff in cross-curricular learning, and how do we introduce global perspectives and cross-cultural understanding. We can't do that on our own. We'd be hard-pressed to say that we are, in the Comox Valley, a fair representation of all the cultures in the world. What do we need to do to go out and to connect, to bring that awareness to our students? So one of the things that we were looking at is developing some staff development opportunities for people to broaden their own understanding and then to go out and connect out into the community. So for the most part, what I could say to you about budget at this point in time is that what we believe that we would be spending the bulk of the funds on would be around time for staff to gain some new skills or to connect and share what they already know and to share their expertise. So we'd be looking at dollars that for the most part would be spent on release things.
Because what we have learned in the Valley, that is the most effective way for us to enable teachers to do the kind of job that we know they want to do. So that's where we are, and when I have a chance to connect with the final partner groups that I haven't been able to connect to, I'll bring back a budget to you. But that's where we would be, that's the areas that we would be targeting. So not just about technology, but about bigger, broader things, and mostly around connecting people and sharing people's expertise through release time.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
Motion for budget process.
Have a seconder? Any discussion? Well, I would like to say that I would like to support this, obviously. I do hope that there is an opportunity to engage teachers and EAs and principals in developing the opportunities. I think that they do donate a lot of their own time. Some don't have great provisions in their collective agreements for professional development. And so I think that this is something that we can do to support not only students but our staff in the district. And I think that it would be good if the opportunities would also include what would work well for board office staff and maybe parents and even the odd trustee if it seems appropriate.
I think what my hope is that what I present to you would be an overarching plan that would include all of those pieces.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Calendar committee. Sherry?
Madam Chair, I'll send this through to the Assistant Superintendent who has been overseeing the work through Jeff Taylor. And you can just open.
Madam Chair, you have a briefing note in front of you in the calendar committee, and we have stakeholders who participate, chaired by Jeff Taylor. Has reached a point in their process where they'd like to come and share what they've outlined as their process for this year, and either look for your endorsement or amendments as you see appropriate. So essentially, the group has developed 2 calendar options for the 2011-2012 school year. First closely resembles our current calendars, basically from September to June, and the second involves moving some days in spring break plus 3 non-instructional days to be adjacent to create 2 weeks spring break. So they have a process in place to share those options with stakeholders, and it's important that you sort of understand what that process might entail so that you can determine whether that is the level of consultation that would be appropriate to help you with your decision at a future board meeting. So they intend to inform all stakeholders of the 2 options, either a very standard status quo calendar or a 2-week spring break, moving some days into August. By teachers, administrators, QP members would be notified by the school district email. Parents would be informed by Singer Voice, which can go out into all of their telephones, as well as the district website, and as well as school newsletter. QP teachers and administrators would be able to record their preference for either calendar or declare that they have no preference via an online survey, and there's some very specific questions there. And parents are then given the opportunity to declare their preference by pressing 1, 2, or 3, of course, on the Singer Voice if they were to respond to the call and go to do the survey. Data gathering for the committee, if you endorse their plan, would be expected to take probably the entire month of March in order for them to get the feedback that they need. They would gather it, aggregate the results, and by stakeholder group and by school, and report that back to you as part of your May decision for the calendar for the upcoming school year. So they would provide a recommendation to you only if it was discovered that all stakeholders shared the same preference, but they would certainly bring you back the aggregate feedback from all of those stakeholder groups. So I think what they're looking for is your endorsement or amendment or opinions on the process that they've developed before they go into all of that work. So I'll turn that over to you. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them, or Jeff will certainly have them as well.
Okay, questions or comments?
I have a motion to make. A motion that the board ratify the calendar committee process plan as presented.
Second.
Okay, do you want to open the discussion, Tom?
I appreciate the information. It's clear, it's concise, and I have no questions.
Anyone else? Brent?
Just a couple questions. One of the issues that came up last year, parents had said they had no clue, so they weren't going to vote. So will there be an information source if parents have questions, like a website, like somewhere to go, or a contact person? So that would be one question that,
I probably can answer most of it, you
Okay.
can help me out, Jeff, if there's more, but because it will be on the district website, we could certainly have an email there, if somebody had a question that wasn't answered by the Singer voice message. But the message will be, you can have quite a lengthy message, so there can be quite a bit of information there, and refer them to the website to actually see the 2 calendar options in front of them, if they wish to choose to see that.
okay, so that was one question. The second question was about the admin assistance issue. If the information will come back from us, come back from the committee as to whether there's a concern about that or not from CUPE.
The days in lieu, you mean the...
Around the, yeah, because no CUPE employees losing hours except admin assistants who can make it up a certain way. So will we be getting just a summary of this is, yeah.
I think what the attempt there is, and they did the work last year as well, is to ensure that there are ways through bank's time that no one would lose work time that would have been anticipated in those days of spring break. So that they have an option as well within their working calendar.
Oh, no, what I'm trying to get at, I'm not asking it very clearly, sorry, is that will we be able to hear if this is a concern for them?
Yes, you would through the CUPE liaison committee. That's where there was a
Okay.
trustee rep.
Okay, so, and then the third question was school planning lieu day on September 1st. Does this add a stat holiday to our year? Is that Labor Day? That's not Labor Day?
Yeah, yeah.
The web form has a link that you click on before you actually cast your vote. It says the word information is a link. You click on it, it redirects you to a page. I think the page is in the package, but I'd like to offer an amendment to this and breaking news. And that is where under considerations for keeping employees, it says my copy is correct. No keeping employees losing hours of work under this option except administrative assistants, accounts clerk, and library clerk. Your copy doesn't reflect that. We should add accounts clerk and library clerk. We can look at this in bank time.
But you, through Madam Chair, that doesn't answer your question, Trustee Goldberg. Your question is that by doing this, does that add a stat holiday that we would normally have to pay for, we would normally not pay for? Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
No.
All the days work out exactly.
Well, no, but I think I need to refer that to Linda Marie. When you calculated, by their day, no, because it's a lieu day.
It's a holiday?
It's
But
a lieu
just the
day.
fact it's a holiday, I'm just getting, it's like working on Christmas. Is Labor Day the 1st?
No.
Rarely.
Oh,
No,
never mind.
it's usually the
Never
3rd or
mind.
the 4th.
Okay,
First Monday.
okay, thanks.
I have a comment and a question, and I'll ask this to Linda Marie, I guess, probably. So this would require teachers to start before the first Tuesday after Labor Day. And I believe that there's provisions in the collective agreement about what the bookends are for the teacher's year. So how would that be addressed?
Through the lieu, it would have to be lieu days. So I think the one thing that is not reflected on here is when you have option 2 and it says non-instructional pro B, the dates that are given there, those are solely lieu days. Those are, the non-instructional days would be in April and August is just to make up for those days. And any details in terms of teachers that work for one semester only and that second semester and all those things, that's something that we would work and have a written agreement with the CDT about the details that we would work through. Likewise, just with QP in terms of any arrangement that needs to be made so that nobody loses anything. So the goal is that nobody gets hurt. That would be arranged with each of the unions and have those agreements.
So are teachers then compelled to work those 3 days prior to the first Tuesday in?
That's the agreement that we would work with the union, that certainly in terms, for them to get paid for their spring break, they would have to have work in lieu in the August-September date. Otherwise, they would be
Okay,
docked
so if
pay.
they didn't come for those 3 days in August, then they would not receive pay at some
At
point?
that spring break.
Okay, so that would be clearly articulated. Okay,
So-
so that
so-
answers that question.
Yeah, this is just final agreements that we have to work with each of the unions individually of how it affects their members.
Okay, and then the Center Voice method, I'd like to know, how is it controlled as to who picks up the phone at the other end and votes? Like if they phone my house, and my 15-year-old picked it up, and she voted, is that who's voting then on this?
Yes, no differently than if we had a web vote or a Survey Monkey, and if your 15-year-old got in and filled out the form for you as well, or for the students in high school particularly who, God forbid, find their field trip form at the bottom of their bag on the day of the field trip and sign it for their mom. At some point in time, there is a piece of honor around this that you do the best, you do due diligence and reasoned decision-making the best that you can. No different than you filling out your Census Canada form and you doing it for your husband, because you're afraid he'll go to jail if he doesn't, if you're in Australia. Like that, at some point in time, you're right, that could potentially happen. We can, but I think you have a way, if I'm correct, that it would only be one from each household, is that correct? Because it would be linked to the telephone number?
Select parent on the web form, and the box pops up to ask for your telephone number.
Yeah.
So I've got a work cell phone, a personal cell phone, a house phone. My husband's got 2 cell phones, so that we have 5 numbers. Could I vote 5 times?
No, because Center Voice only goes to one number.
On the web form, could I vote 5 times?
We only have to take one because it's what's listed we'll take the BCE number because that's the one that's being exported into Center.
Okay, so if you can cross those so that if a number pops up that voted that's not in BC ESIS, you reject the vote?
It wouldn't get called.
It wouldn't get called.
Okay, so how do I access the web form? That's maybe I'm not clear on how that works. And I
Link off the main page.
Off the main website?
Yes.
So I could go and click on that web form and then fill it out and give my cell phone number. And I could at home do it again or whatever.
If you use the Center Voice vote, that will be recorded in the next work file. If you then voted on the web form, you would be able to track who you voted for.
But if I use 2 different phone numbers, how do you know it's
On
me?
the web form.
If you use a different number on the web form that wasn't in the BCE database, you will be.
So you're somehow going to cross-tabulate that? Well, no, I mean, there's funny things. Think back to Florida, right? I'm a conspiracy.
Yes, you're not George Bush.
No, I know, you're not George Bush. And nobody's Nixon either, so just to say that. So I'm not sure that I actually like this process, and I think it's going to be difficult for me. I'm not going to know what I'm going to think about the results probably until they come to us. So I don't know that I can elaborate more than that. I think it's a flawed process. It's not very scientific. There's some issues with it, and so I'll have to see what results it yields and let that inform my vote.
I'm not sure if I
In
can
May.
ask what the issues might be, because I know from the previous year, there was a worry that enough parents weren't contacted. And the Center Voice is actually the most scientific way we have of actually contacting parents. So if we leave it as a newsletter that might be at the bottom of the backpack, or, something on our website that nobody reads, we may not get the type of result that I think you were asking for in the past.
My concern has always been for the families that struggle, and that they would be difficult to contact and to ask to weigh in on this.
So I'm thinking that probably in the process, I'm hoping that one of the things that the committee really did consider was telephone is pretty much a technology in every home, and that because we will actually be able to track the results by school, we essentially probably are somewhat tracking by economic area. So I think you'll be able to see those results, and we'll be able to see what kind of level of response we get. But I would imagine that in a process like this, you're looking for a sweeping result, not 100%. We don't get those kind of responses in any survey.
Right.
But just looking that people have been consulted and that there are various areas that have been actually responding to the survey.
So just want to put that out, just to declare right now that I see this as a flawed process, and I'm not sure what data will be given, and I'll just have to progress accordingly. Sheila?
I think that this is a vast improvement over last year's in terms of making the effort to reach out and making it possible. I was a bit concerned about the number of parents who don't have access to computers, so I was pleased to see the news newsletter as being one of the routes. And I think it's important, not every kid leaves it in the bottom of a backpacking. I think that's an important route, and I guess the question is, what information are we going to give to parents who can't respond via computer, or can they go to the school and do it? So it needs to be an option around how will parents respond.
They can actually respond if they can on the telephone.
So if they didn't get the Springer voice call, but can they go?
Yes, they can go
They
to
can
the
do it.
website.
Okay, so that's
Absolutely.
great.
There's
Yeah,
options.
yeah. I think it's still self-selecting. The parents who choose to respond will respond, but it is getting information out much more effectively than we did last year. So we need to try it.
Yes?
Fran asked my question with respect to QP, and I'll wait to hear back from a report on that. But I guess the concern and the provincial issue is, I don't think our district is doing that, and just to clarify on that one, this is not about saving money. This is not about adding minutes to the day. The kids will have the same amount of days, and it's to support the health and well-being and looking at something at spring break to add the extra on that. Because I know provincially there's been a real issue over school districts adding spring break, cutting time to save money, and we're not doing that. This is to support, we're doing this in a supportive manner. Am I correct?
Correct. The days are actually identical. It's just where they reside in the calendar.
And I think maybe parents need to understand that, how you get that information out there, because if parents know that their children are going to be attending the same amount of days, and if they're not adding minutes to that, also I think will support parents' understanding of why they're doing it. Well, you may have people thinking, okay, I get that. They're going to, they're just rearranging the days on the schedule. I think that's something that parents would probably be more apt to, I think, support.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, so, did you want to close?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, so Debbie, could you please read the motion back? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, carry on to the international program Homestay.
I'm speaking to this agenda this meeting, Madam
Okay.
You recall at the two education committee meetings this year, one was informational, the other was sharing of the annual review and report, that discussion about homestay at elementary school future was discussed. And so given certainly timelines around preparing for next year, we brought this forward for your consideration or direction at this time. So what this briefing note speaks to is from Rob Miller, our Director of International Education, commenting on the changes perhaps and the growth within our international student program, and certainly the changes that have been made in terms of administering the program and the supports that are in place. He speaks to certainly the fact that there was a time in, I believe, the spring of 2005, it mentions that we had a small cohort of Korean elementary students who came through a homestay program, and that was changed, and probably the reason was situationally there was really not an administrator overseeing the program. We didn't have a homestay coordinator. We didn't have ESL established in the schools. We didn't have a very, some of the pieces we have, the welcoming atmosphere that we've established in our district around this, this cultural, multicultural opportunity that our international students provide. And there was, sort of some question of why are they here, how are they being cared for? And basically, when in 2005, that was the year we began to build that very strong infrastructure. And elementary students have been accepted if their family is here, so it hasn't been a homestay piece. If their family is residing in the Comox Valley, then they are eligible to apply to be an international student in our school. So it's been a very positive cultural impact. I know myself speaking to administrators and teachers in the schools and looking at the projects that these students complete and the impact that they have on their school, even when they're only here for a very short cultural exchange, has been really phenomenal. And so I know that we have to think of this as being a different culture that would send a young child to another country for an education, and it isn't our culture. So I might put my motherhood hat on and wonder, my goodness, but it really truly is a cultural piece that these are families that are seeking this for their children, and the international program would like to be given provision to begin the homestay program again. And so they'll, what we're looking for is Other districts certainly offer it to elementary age students beginning at grade 6. And what we would be looking is beginning again at grade 6 for whether an open-ended number or whether you'd like to consider it a pilot, but that for the 2011 September, that we would consider homestay for elementary students in the international program.
Okay, does anyone have any questions with respect to this,
Just a
Janice?
comment, Madam Chair. It is now 5 minutes to 9, and we've got quite a lot on our agenda, and there's one item that has to be done before the end of the month, I believe, and that is the amended annual budget. So I think we may have to make a decision whether we want to stop now, come back, or continue on. And I have an engagement, I have something that I won't be reporting to after 9 o'clock tonight, so I'm not going to, I'll tell you right up front, I'm not going to go past 9 o'clock, so we have to make that decision.
Okay, well then I'll poll the board and ask, does anybody want to make a motion, given what Janice has said, to extend the meeting past 9 o'clock? Okay, so, yeah, I know. So as it is, then our meeting will stop in 3 minutes. If someone wants to make a motion to move a different item up to,
Vary the agenda to allow the amended annual budget to be read. There is a requirement to be administered by February 28th.
I second that motion.
okay, discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That is carried.
I would move the school district 71 Comox Valley 2010-2011 amended annual budget by law in the amount of $74,941,717 received its first reading.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? Fran?
Question, since Lynn isn't here, I don't know what, one of the things in terms of background, why we're not in a deficit situation was because of the holdback money, but we were also told because of being under budget and staffing. And when I looked at how that broke down, noted that it seemed to be EAs, like $200,000, almost $200,000 less than budgeted for. So I don't know if there's a reason that that's the case, and just because it doesn't seem to dovetail with parents' concerns that we hear about in terms of EA time being decreased.
Madam Chair, a lot of the adjustments are happening against the annual budget. Of course, the annual budget process is prepared this time a year ago kind of thing. So you're getting into the staffing rotation, you're getting into the staffing matrix model, and deciding what you're going to need. So you're building your budget based on a plan, awaiting the September numbers, of course. And so when the September numbers come in, you won't say you reset, but basically you adjust according to the need at the time. So the adjustment is basically indicating that we didn't need the staffing element that was planned for in the annual budget process, based on the students that came in September.
I understand.
Again, the annual budget process is done obviously the 6 months prior to the plan, or prior to the actual seeing of the kids, as it were. So when it comes to even the staffing of special needs for special needs students, you're seeing what the cohorts or what the needs of the kids are going to be come September, and therefore through obviously through these student services, they will make adjustments for staff needs. So it's not always necessarily going to happen that you're going to need all those, the value of the budget that you're setting aside for the annual process.
So I understand that there's the proposed budget, and then there's reality in terms of what's required. But just in terms of looking at other, like teachers, principals, there wasn't that disproportionate. Like, to me, the change seems disproportionate, and I don't understand why there would be such a decreased need for EAs as opposed to other professionals.
Community linked funding funds some of the EAs also. So certainly there's a a few dynamics going on to try to fund the EAs kind of. I mean, there's other funds, obviously, for the community events, not knowing where those funds were going to be this time last year. So you're sort of, like I said, you've got your crystal ball and you're attempting to meet the needs that's going to happen come September. It's not always going to be a perfect fit because sometimes the funds do follow through in other areas.
And do you agree, Madam Chair? And I think that, I think you're saying, so could we have hired another $200,000 over the EAs? I think is what you're saying. And I think that there were a number of things in play, and I don't believe it was at the last meeting, but it was in a meeting 2 times ago where the Secretary was explaining to you that as we've actually cleaned up some of the staffing, we've got a new process by which we actually staff. We've actually become more efficient, and we realized that we have been over-reporting the number of the EA dollars previously. So part of what this looks like is the difference between, we're not sure that we were reporting our numbers accurately in the previous budget projections. It doesn't mean that Esther has $200,000 in her pocket right now. Some means it doesn't, because it stands in my doorway a fair amount. We do actually have, we always keep somewhere about $100,000 in that kind of staffing. Not that it's actually in our hand, but for contingency and for example, did you not deploy an EA last week? Brand new for a young fellow who emerged to us as a need. So that's part of what the hold is. And this is as of today. We could potentially spend that money by the end of June. I think that's what people need to understand. Because we might have to spend it again. Just like you have a contingency for teacher staffing, for sick and those kinds of things. So it doesn't mean that Esther has 5 EAs in her pocket and could now go out and do that. She would like to do that. But it actually means that probably when I looked at it, I estimated, I thought it was more like 90,000 by the time you hold back what you need for a contingency. Because we expect it's only February. We often have to deploy another EA or 2 between now and June.
I'd just like to say it's 2 minutes after 9, and I, for one, I'm going to vote against these bylaws because I'm not in favor of rushing something as important as a budget through to meet a deadline. We're going to have another board meeting very soon anyways to complete the rest of our business.
You
So,
have to have it before the end of the month.
yeah. Yeah.
Just
Saturday
comment
would work.
for friends, there's a few things in play with this reduction. We actually predicted about 90 students less this year than the previous year. We actually finished up 38 students more. So there's about 128 student difference there. There's also a $420,000 reduction in principals and vice principals. About $190,000 in EAs, another $290,000 in support staff.
What page are you looking at?
$200,000 more.
40.
What are we doing?
That's right. Well, no, it's $83,000 more in substitutes, $680,000 more in teachers.
What page are you on, Darren?
40. Page 40.
Okay, so are we going home now?
There's a motion on the floor.
So there's a motion on the floor that we need to vote on, and then maybe we're going to have to take our chances with all being thrown in jail if we can't have a meeting by the end of the month.
I think the checks don't.
The checks don't come. Okay, so all those, okay, so anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. And with that, someone would need to make a motion to extend the meeting for us to continue on with this evening. Does someone wish to make a motion to continue on with the meeting?
Well, I'll make a motion to continue on with the meeting in spite of Janice's previous statement. Perhaps she can give us another 15 minutes. I would like to make a motion to continue with the meeting.
Okay, so you want to second that?
I have a question. Is it just to finish this bylaw or continue with the agenda? If it's just this bylaw, I will support that. If it's the agenda, I will not support it.
Well, I think that I agree. I don't want to be rushed around here.
You can make a specific motion if you like.
Sheila, you have to realize that when you move to extend it, you don't get a specific time limit.
You can
carry
put
on
that
with
in
the
there, and if
agenda.
the board was in agreement with it, then we would approve it. You to
Well,
vote
I
against
guess I'd have
it.
to ask Janice how long she's...
So this isn't a negotiation process, Sheila, so if you have a motion on the floor here to extend the meeting, would you like to add a time frame to that or no?
In order to complete the budget.
Okay, so that's pretty specific. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Budget, I'll agree with that.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is defeated. So the motion, or the meeting is adjourned. Have a motion to adjourn. Do we need a motion to adjourn now?
Madam Chair, I just need some procedural clarification. You passed the motion then to pass the budget?
No.
No, first reading only.
First reading.
But you didn't read it.
I did.
Did you read it? Yes, sorry, I missed it. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
what
you
you
did
did.
read
Can I make a point of order?
So I'm asking for some assistance here. We've just defeated a motion to extend the meeting. It's 9:06. Do we need a motion to adjourn the meeting?
We're not adjourning the meeting, we're postponing it for 2 minutes.
Okay, so the meeting stands adjourned until we reconvene. Thank you.
Point of order?